Sarah, can you hear me? Yes, Sarah, we already started. I handed over the session to you. Please introduce the director. He's joined.
So, good morning, all ladies and gentlemen, and a very, very warm pleasure to have you here again in our fourth session of the webinar series that we have been having. Indeed, I am really and truly excited with this, shall we call it, end of year session, which it is only right that it is going to be hosted by our Directorate of Policy. Just to take you back, our first policy dialogue was hosted by the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, where under the theme of expanding learning opportunities, we looked at whether what we had done in terms of our remote learning and to what extent it had reached every child in Kenya. So that was hosted by the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. Thereafter, we had the pleasure of the next policy dialogue being hosted by the Directorate of Special Education. And we zoomed in, especially looking at children with special needs, and many issues were raised. Very recently, we then focused attention on children from arid and semi-arid areas, amongst the others that NACONEC serves. And so you can see that it is very apt that we are now closing with looking at specifically the Directorate of Policy that really has the overall responsibility of policy issues, looking at what we have done and the gaps that we have. So it is a very good way to end the year. And I am very, very delighted that this policy dialogue is being hosted by Dr. Silvester Mulambe as director, who is the Director of Policy and Partnerships of the East African Community at the Ministry of Education. Prior to this, he was the Deputy Director, Field Services and County Director of Education in Kisumu. Dr. Mulambe chairs the review of the Basic Education Act Task Force and the Multi-Agency Working Group of Land Titling of Public Schools. And of course, it is very good that he's a chemistry and biology teacher. Dr. Mulambe, karibu sana, so that you can post the issues for us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah Ruto. I think I've been very obedient, Sarah. Still on a journey now in Kisumu. But I must have waved to your people down in Rift Valley. But I think it's quite a good moment. And I think even me, I just want to say a good morning to everybody on this platform. We in policy are happy to be with you. We are represented here by myself, Dr. Silvester Mulambe, who is the Director of Policy and Partnership. And I'm also with my Deputy Director, Madam Gachoya, who has been with you from the very first, the second things. And of course, she has been giving me briefs when she comes back. And it is just good that we are ending the year this way, when all of us are on board. And this time round, we in policy are the ones trying to host you in this. And we do appreciate all that. So thanks a lot again for PAL for also making arrangements for this particular meeting, because without that initiative, maybe we may not have reached this level. So take it from me that we are very grateful for the arrangement that you have put in place to have us have this particular dialogue. These kinds of dialogue, I want to say that going forward, we would wish to have more and more of them, looking at many different areas. Last time, I commented on just a few areas. And then, of course, looking at what you have on the table, It's mainly looking at the area of community-based learning and also the area of homeschooling. We are all aware that we as ministry had an initiative to have community-based learning. One, to help our learners who are actually, we would say in quotes, getting idle, particularly some of them who may not have been able to access the remote learning. They were kind of getting idle. And just like Dr. Sarah Ruto once put it in the media, that the children were actually undergoing retrogression, and intellectually they may not be the same as they were when this particular pandemic came. So this was an intervention to help us to bridge that gap. And you remember we had elaborate arrangements in place. We had to use teachers in the localities they stay, teach children from whichever schools and from that locality, teach within public areas, not necessarily in schools, and that preparations had started and we were just to start. And all of you remember that one stakeholder had to take us to court. And I remember the ruling was
It seems like we have lost Dr. Mulambe.
I will try and get hold of him, Sarah.
Okay.
All right.
In the meantime, to the participants, those who are joining us, we welcome you. And as we are waiting for Dr. Mulambe, who is actually on a tour of duty in Western Kenya, to reconnect, internet might be low there. Just a reminder that this is our fourth webinar series, and it is this time being hosted by the Directorate of Policy in the ministry. And Dr. Mulambe is back.
Yeah, sorry for that. You know, I'm using a phone to give me internet. You know, I'm not in the office, so I think there are interruptions when calls come. So I was saying that somewhere in the middle, when we were actually just suffering the pandemic, a group of stakeholders actually came to us, and of course they had even gone to court earlier, and they had gone to court to complain that their children have not closed. Their children are taking their classes at home. They are practicing homeschooling, and therefore for them, they have not been closing, and that they.
Unfortunately, we have lost Daktari again. Perhaps this is a confirmation of some of the internet issues that happen when one is trying to conduct learning, remote learning or digital learning in some sections in Kenya. So Dion, if you can see, if you can reach out to him again. I am sure there will not be a he's back now. Karibu Daktari.
Sorry, yeah, I'm telling you my problem. I'm using a hotspot from my phone, and when calls come, there's some interruption. So sorry, but let me try to move fast so that I finish what I'm saying. So I was saying that somewhere in between, certain stakeholders actually made us think outside the box. They told us for them, their children had been practicing homeschooling, and that for them, they didn't close, and that for them, their children were continuing the learning, and that their children needed to do the examinations on time. So the court equally advised us that us and them need to sit down and have a discussion. And of course, that's the discussion that we are supposed to be having now going forward. But I'm also happy that that subject of homeschooling is part of what we're supposed to discuss today. And you see, there are so many things to consider on this one. One is that, you see, we have the Constitution. Is it Article 42 saying that every Kenyan has a right to education, which is something which is key for us to consider. I think Article 53 Constitution talking about free and compulsory basic education, as well as our Basic Education Act quoting the same. You see, our initial thinking was that when you talk about free and compulsory, these are children who are supposed to be in school, our regular schools, and that we are able to monitor and evaluate their learning at school level. But you see, stakeholders are brought in the other angle, where we now have to see how to bring on board the element of homeschooling. So definitely it will be very interesting in this particular forum to look at the design of it, how we want to design it, how do we want it to work within our systems, how are we going to make sure that we are able to monitor, how are we going to make sure that we are able to even evaluate the outcomes that come from this kind of learning. And that me as Director of Policy and as a member of now this panel, I believe that we have quite a lot to discuss, particularly in this area of homeschooling. Otherwise, Madam Chair, I want just to submit at that point and say that I'll be available for some period to respond to whichever questions that have been directed to me. But should I have left briefly, then Gachoya is equally competent. She's able to also respond to questions directed to us. Otherwise, thank you once again for this opportunity. Let us move on. Thank you.
Asante. Asante sana, Daktari, for not only accepting to host the series, but also making time, wherever you are. And I think that is good. Work continues irrespective of where we are. And Daktari is in charge of, his directorate is in charge of all policies, but you can see the main policy he's talking about is one particular one. And I therefore have the pleasure of introducing our second speaker. And our second speaker today, Osman, if you can move on, is Dr. Joyce Kinyanjui. And Dr. Joyce Kinyanjui is the Managing Director of Zizi Afrique, which envisions an Africa in which each child has an equal opportunity to grow, learn, think, and thrive. Joyce previously worked as the program manager at the Women Educational Researchers of Kenya, or called WORK. And she has 25 years experience in various aspects, including developing citizen-led assessments, early grade reading assessments, and EGMA. So Joyce has the task today of giving us a policy scan from the lens of the competency-based curriculum framework. If all of you recall, the CBC framework has identified 9 guiding principles. For it to come alive, it needs to be enabled, and the policy environment is a critical one. So she will give this broader one, and the good part is that it will identify the policy Dr. Mulambe has talked about, but which will also then allow us to continue the discussions. And as she comes in, ladies and gentlemen, you can see from Dr. Mulambe's comments, he has invited you to start thinking through with the directorate in terms of what would be the tenets or that need to feed into the new policy on homeschooling that they are thinking about. Karibu Joyce, I'll give you 10 minutes, please, so that we have a lot of time for discussion. Daktari. Please unmute. Joyce, we cannot hear you.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning, and put the slideshow, please.
Yes, it's a pleasure to see everyone. this morning, and I hope you're all doing well. I can see we have new people, and I'll just maybe situate where we are, and so that everybody is on board. So welcome today to this webinar series. We are looking at policy dialogues, and you may be wondering what they are. We really are a network of policy actors, and we have just three things: to identify policy issues, and I'll take you through to some of the issues we've identified, and also use evidence on what policies are working or what gaps exist, so that we can also make informed policy suggestions. And I'm sure by the end of the day today, or within the next 1 hour, we should come up at least on policy suggestions on homeschooling and community-based learning. Now, so we have those three objectives. So we'll examine the current curriculum to see to what extent it addresses educational challenges. And our focus is to at least review 7 policies. As Sarah has said, we've done at least 2, one on opportunity and the other one on learners with special needs, and then be able to assemble our package and evidence on equity and inclusion. So I'll dive straight into the tasks that I have in the next couple of minutes. So we have 7 guiding principles, and these are the basis of the current curriculum reforms. I know it's a whole education reform, but in terms of CBC, we'll look at the 7. We have opportunity, excellence, inclusion, diversity, differentiated curriculum and learning, parental empowerment and engagement, and community service learning. So those are the 7 guiding principles. And what we did is we reviewed over 30 policies. I know there are many more within our sector, that is education, but we only looked at those that touch on basic education. And I will look at each of the 7 principles and see what could be lacking. And first, I'll start with opportunity. And we looked at many policies that touch on anything to do with opportunity. And for us, opportunity was looking at issues of access, retention, transition. That's what we were referring to as opportunity, every child in school and learning. And one of the, we found that the policies are there, and many of them address provision of free and compulsory pre-primary education, but sometimes it's not clear on the implementation or the framework for ensuring that all children are in school and learning. And we find there were no, I think this one has happened on health and nutritional support. I think Gachoya mentioned last week that this had been passed. Now, the other thing that hinders opportunity is we lack up-to-date data on childbirths in Kenya that causes a challenge in terms of planning. And then, although we talk of free primary education, at the same time, BOMs and PTAs are allowed from time to time to agree on levies. So it seems like on one hand, we give, but on the other hand, we take out. Now, we've been talking of 100% transition to secondary school, but we don't seem to have a policy on infrastructure development. And even as we think about the grade 4, who after grade 6 will be going to middle school, exactly what's the infrastructure development? What will that look like? Now we keep talking about ICT integration, but we don't have guidelines on how that is to happen in terms of whether is it digital learning or how do we integrate ICT in our sector. Now, in terms of homeschooling, we've already identified that. There are children for some reason, and now we have a national reason or global reason, COVID, a pandemic. Others, sometimes we normally have a local crisis where there's flooding and children can't go to school, or there's drought or whatever is happening. So we don't have a policy on homeschooling. Now, we do have NEMIS, but it's not clear on data protection. Who really holds that data? Is it the education sector? Is it the security apparatus? Because we collect a lot of data under NEMIS, especially on children, with the new number that they'll be receiving. Then again, when we calculate capitation grant, there are hidden costs in education that are not there, that are not captured while calculating the capitation grant. Now, the next one that can be quite controversial, there's a school of thought that seems to think, well, if we have equalization fund for counties that are lagging behind, why not also calculate capitation grants considering the minorities and children from marginalized communities? I know with children with special needs, that's catered for, but what about children who are farthest behind, who are found in marginalized communities? I know it's a topic that keeps coming up, so maybe it's a high time we discuss that. What does that mean? If we can have equalization fund for counties, what about the children? So that's on opportunities. So the policies are there, but those are some of the gaps that could be preventing children from accessing education. I'll go to the next one, which is excellence. So we do have ACE and UPDATE policies. They are yet to be aligned to the new curriculum. So, so children who and young adults who go through those two systems, they find that they're still in the old system because it's not aligned to the new curriculum. Now, assessment, we moved from summative assessment to formative assessment, but we still don't have an assessment framework. Now, when we look at the SCAC in terms of quality, they're supposed to be independent as recommended in their bill, but they are still a directorate under the ministry. Now, when we look at research in science, research, the ministry only has a policy where research is focused on science and technology, but I think the mandate needs to be expanded to continue doing action research and finding out many things with regards to the rollout of CBC to ensure improved quality and children are actually acquiring the competencies that are required. Now, CBC has demands and the staffing norms, when we look at TSC, that hasn't changed. So could it be a high time we review the staffing norms to meet the demands of CBC? Now, next is diversity and inclusion.
Joyce, you have 2 more minutes, please.
Yeah, thank you. So diversity and inclusion. So we don't have guidelines on talent identification and indicators for children with special needs. We are really not sure which competencies they should be having. And then in the last year's census, we introduced the third gender, which is intersex. But we don't have guidelines for intersex learners. Which boarding schools should they attend? Which learning, even when they go to school, which washrooms are they to use? And so there's a lot to think about. Now, next is differentiated curriculum and learning. We are still not sure whether it's a differentiated curriculum or differentiated learning, because if we consider differentiated curriculum, it means that children within the same grade level can be learning different things depending on their interest and talents. But is that what we are saying? And if that's exactly what we are saying, where is the policy guideline that will guide the teacher in knowing what curriculum, differentiated curriculum, for who and how do you decide what to give children? And then also with learning, how does that happen? Now, parental empowerment and engagement, we do have policies, but when now it comes to blended learning, where we are having face-to-face and online learning, how does that work out? Where parents suddenly found themselves with work to support their children's learning through ICT, the radio, that programs have been going on. There needed to be a parent guiding the children, but again, it's lacking. And then lastly, I've combined today's topic under community service learning. I wasn't sure where to put it. So we don't have community service learning, a policy, that's guiding its implementation. We are not sure what kids should be doing. Now, again, community-based learning, as Dr. Mulambe has said, that is lacking, and also homeschooling. So those two will be today's topic. So from what we've presented, you can see there's a lot to discuss in terms of policy guidelines. And as I finish, so we've had 3 webinar series. So we have, sorry, I've left out one on the one Sarah was talking about on KICD and expanded learning. We've talked on special needs, and also most recently, we looked at opportunities for children in marginalized areas where NACONEC was taking a lead. So that sort of gives you a snapshot of where we are coming, the gaps that we've identified, and some of the things that we can discuss. So today's discussion really is on those two, because we feel they are pertinent now that school has been disrupted. And sometimes schools are closing because of the pandemic. What happens to this one school or this one region where there is schools are closed because of whatever is going on? So that's the end of my presentation, and thank you for listening. So over to you, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Joyce Kinyanjui, for taking us through the policy scan. I am glad that we have a number of policymakers, and Kezia, I will bring you to also elaborate on some of the policies and policy updates because the ministry is always doing things at a later point. But now it is my pleasure to introduce our last speaker. And our last speaker is Anne Gachoya, who is the Deputy Director of Education at the Directorate of Policy, Partnerships and the East African Community in the Ministry of Education. She is in charge of coordinating education reforms in the ministry and the National Education Sector Support Program development. Anne is a professional education planner, experienced in policy assurance and standards, policy design, formulation, and implementation. Indeed, the latest document that Anne and many colleagues, of course, in the Directorate of Policy have developed are the COVID guidelines, which are published. And while they seem aspirational, they actually talk about the policy issues that one must have in order to ensure that children are safe, everybody is safe. So very happy to have you, Anne, and over to you, 10 minutes, please. Anne, could you please unmute?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, all of you. Diona, we can proceed. So I think we are so grateful for this opportunity when we are discussing about the policies that the ministry has and the influence policies make in ensuring inclusive and equitable education for all children. The essence is to give every child opportunity to learn and to access education. And what we are saying since independence, the government has recognized education as a basic human right because it is very critical for human resource and national development of the country. In this recognition, we find that the education sector has, through its policies, strategies, and plans, committed to provide inclusive and equitable quality education and training for all children. In line with this, we find that through the session of paper number 1 of 2019 and the National Education Sector Strategic Plan 2018 to 2022, the ministry has earmarked some of the policies and the guidelines and regulations that need to be reviewed, new ones that need to be developed, and even the regulations that need to be amended. Diona, you are not moving to the next slide, please. Diona, you are still in the fast. Move faster because of also time. So move to the next because we have moved to the next. Move to the next slide. We have done this. So the issue is what basically hinder equitable and inclusive education, despite the fact that most of the policies talks about inclusivity, they talk about equitability, even the Constitution itself provide for that. Amid COVID-19, we realized that after schools were closed from 16th to 20th of March 2020, that being a measure to control the spread of COVID-19, education sector has really been hit, particularly the children who are not accessing most of the services. And with this interruption to the education sector, it is likely to have some long-term implications on the out-of-school children as well as the youth. Some of the things that we have witnessed even in the recent past include child labor, pregnancy, marriage, exploitation, as well as the internet crime, the cyber crime, among many others. Diona, move the next slide. So the government through the KICD actually continued to provide education through the online services. However, it was also noted that quite a proportion of children were not accessing the online services. Mostly, these children come from the minorities and the marginalized communities. Not forgetting that the world is also changing. We are in a globally competitive world of technology, and there is transformation, which is also evolving around us. We find the use of technology very much. So based on that, there is need for policymakers, for stakeholders to think aloud and come up with some policy direction to ensure that even this learning would continue during the post-COVID-19 in order to promote equitable and inclusive education. So basically, what we are saying is we are happy because of these conversations that have been going on the policy dialogue, more so because of the emerging issues that Kenya, as part of the global world, is also facing in a changing world, and also emerging from what we have learned from the corona effect, that homeschooling, community-based learning has also become an option in ensuring that children are reached with education. They are given the opportunity to think, to learn, and to progress regardless of the circumstances. So community-based learning, we say it's a strategy. It's about a pedagogy. It's an approach of learning, whereby we learn from observations, we learn from our experiences. Diona, you should move to the next slide. Our experiences with the community, having those instruction reflections and all that. That is all about community-based learning. It is very important because it helps in social interactions. The community within, remember, children come from the communities. The schools are within the communities. And that is why we are saying even within this COVID session or COVID scenario, it's about the communities. It's about what the communities are behaving, how the community are behaving, because this is actually influencing what is happening to the learners and how the learners are reacting. It's about community. So it's community also benefiting from the learners. It's the learners also benefiting from the communities, because we cannot separate ourselves from the communities which we all come from. So community-based learning, we define it as a wide variety of instructional heritage, national environment methods, programs, and also other methodologies that involve community engagement, reflection, among many others. Diona, move to the next slide, please. So what we are saying, this also provide a motivating factor to the communities. It is, we can call it a resource. It's a resource. It's an asset when we use the community-based learning, because you get connected. If it is the learners, they get connected with what they learn at the school environment, and also what is the real life situation outside. And definitely our members or participants, we have noted even during this COVID era, where we have some learners who have really helped their communities solve their needs. Others have shown communities how to plant some vegetables. They have even dug some water and all that. So it becomes good, a motivating factor to all of us. And we are able to learn from one another within the community. That cordial relationship, it enhances the learning experiences. It's about the learning experiences. So we move to the next, please. Diona, move to the next slide. So we also have some other terminologies that we can use for this community-based learning. That is community-based education, the place-based learning, whatever, the homeschooling. All of them rotate allowed the same things. It's also equip learners with the practical skills, knowledge. They gain good personal habits, competences, skills, issues of health, issues of sanitation, issues of values. It's about value-based education. That's what we are talking about. So if it is value-based, it's about the behavior change. It's about the behavior change. It's about so many other things. It's also about coming together. I think this one we have done, the citizenship, leadership to be that can be realized with this community-based learning. We can move to the next slide. Establishing harmony, we covered this slide. Let's move to the next slide, Diona. Establishing of harmony within the school environment, the learners and the communities. All those are benefits that can be derived when we have community-based learning. So what we are saying as a ministry, and we have noted that with the transformation in the world and with the COVID, we have noted that community-based learning is an option where homeschooling can also be encouraged. It is based on these premises that the Ministry of Education, in its performance contract for the period 2020-2021, earmarked the development of homeschooling policy as one of the targets for the Cabinet Secretary during this time. So as a ministry, we have embarked on the development of this policy, which will look aloud the community-based learning issues, the out-of-school children, and the many others. You all remember You all remember that the ministry had planned to roll out community-based learning program during this era of Corona period. But someone went to the court, and the court actually said, we already do not have a policy or a legal framework within which we could have implemented that program well. And based on that, that is the reason why it is also necessary to have this policy in place in order to give way on how this curriculum, the curriculum will be taught under the CBL. How will the standards itself, how are the education standards, even as we do this community-based learning, and these are within the communities, how do we maintain the standards as a ministry, as a government? What about the assessment? The policy areas to be covered will include the assessment. How do you assess this community-based learning wherever it is taking place? How do you monitor those activities that are taking place? How do you supervise? The other thing is on the teacher capacity. The teacher education policy is also being developed under that, so that we are also able to capture the pedagogical skills, the methodologies, because at present, maybe the teacher, we were trained how to work on it, allowed the classroom situation, but things are also changing. So the need of capacity enhancement of teachers is very critical, noting that the most important input in the learning process include the teacher, Hence, the pedagogical skills will have to be enhanced. So basically, we can move to the next slide, please. We can move to the next slide. So basically what we are saying is, with the community, as Dr. Kinyanjui pointed out, there are some policy issues that could be there. We also have some implementation gaps, because I believe even in most of the things that let's say like guidance on health and nutrition, we already have revised policy for health and nutrition. We also have the guidelines for health and nutrition. We have the ICT policy 2006, revised in 2020, among many others. The awareness also is a key thing that we must also look up to. How are people aware of the existence of this policy? Do they understand how they are supposed to be implemented? And if so, are these policy and guidelines and even regulations implemented the way they are supposed to be implemented? The key thing is about the enforcement as well, because we need to enforce as citizens of this country. It is the high time that we need to start. Somebody says one time, you are the change that you want to see. So I want to call upon all of us that we become the change that we want to see in this country. And as I conclude, for the community-based learning, we are saying never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only one thing that ever has. Those were words from Margaret Mead, and we are saying with the Paul Network and many other participants who are here. Indeed, we could be a small group of 149 participants, but with the thoughtful, committed mind, we can change the world through policy interventions and ensuring their implementation for the good of the children of this country. So thank you very much. You can
Thank
put
you.
the slide for thank you, even as I say, thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne, for your presentation and indeed for the call to action as citizens of Kenya, as citizens of the region, as citizens of the world. We have a duty to do, and we can if we put it to it. Many thanks, Anne. It is now my pleasure to invite back all our presenters today, Dr. Silvester Mulambe, Dr. Joyce Kinyanjui, and Anne. There are many questions, ladies and gentlemen, and many thanks for all the questions that are coming. Some are general on other issues, and some are specific on the proposed homeschooling policy. But perhaps to bring us up, I'd like to ask Kezia to give a quick update, as she has put on the chat, on the various policies as an opener, and then we will ask now a series of questions to the other people. Kezia, please. Kezia, I can see you're here. You had put some words, there were many words on the various policies that have been updated, and I thought that you could just share them because they are pertinent so that we can then open up the presentation. If you are here, this is your moment, please.
Kezia, please unmute your mic if you're trying to speak.
Okay, it looks like she is not here. So what I will do is that I will begin with the more general questions that had been posed, and any of the panelists can please take them up. And then after that, we will go specifically to the questions that relate to the proposed policy on homeschooling that the directorate wants to do. So the first question from Josephine to any panelist, is it possible to come up with some solutions for BOM and PTA, especially when the learners need some necessities which may not be in school, and the only option is to request parents to fund hence school levies? Anyone take up that question? And the second question from Dr. Josephine, our children are our wealth. What can be done to put all on board despite their learners' ability and locality? And Josephine further asks, do we have data on intersex learners in our schools? And yeah, so any of you who can take those questions, and if you can keep them brief, it will allow us to address many more questions. The next set of questions I'm going to come up with are questions to do with issues of hearing impairment. Yes, so answer those questions, please, any of the panelists.
Okay,
Hello?
maybe I can answer on intersex because I read quite a bit on it. Kenya is the first African country to actually acknowledge a third gender. So all other African countries either have male or female. And as such, this is the first time in the history of our country, we actually collected data on intersex. So I'm not sure that schools had reached that level because this is a gender that was just recognized last year.
Thank you, Joyce.
Maybe, hello?
Yes, Dr. go ahead.
Yes, yeah. I just wanted to also make an attempt to the three questions. One is on the issue of BOM and PTA. I think it's also good to be clear that the two committees have different roles. The Board of Management is actually the manager. They do the management of the institution. The PTA mostly does resource mobilization and ensuring that the welfare of parents and the learners are observed. So I don't know, it's not coming out very, very clearly why, what the person who was asking the questions really wanted. I wish that person comes out again to make the question a bit more specific. On data for intersex, I think that is something that we are yet to work on. You know, Chair, the intersex issue has, it also has stigma on it. And quite a number of individuals who are affected are likely to be secretive about it. And that you may find that schools have them even today, but they may not be able to kind of even get this information. So you find that the children do align themselves somehow to whichever side. Is it whichever side is stronger or something? And life kind of continues. But I think it is something that we can still take back to our data experts and see.
Thank you. Oh, Daktari has, I think we have lost Daktari. But perhaps I can go to the next series of questions. And the next series of questions are on disability. And if we could kindly have Margaret Odhiambo brought as a panelist so that she can ask her question. Margaret will probably ask it in sign language. Is it possible to bring her on board? As we are waiting for Margaret to be brought on board, I will ask John's question. When planning for learners with disability, do the policies consider diverse disabilities or lump learners together? I do not know if we have Mr. Haga here, but he can probably also respond to that. But do we lump them or do we think about them in with their special disabilities? Then the other question also to do with disabilities from Oscar, who is from Mary Magdalene School for the Deaf in Embu, and he asks, how has the policy on games and sports changed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, especially on special needs education games? Lastly is a longer question from Margaret. Is Margaret now here with us?
Yes, sir. I've just asked her to start her video.
Okay, Margaret, could you please start your video so that you can ask your question?
Okay, she's on.
Thank you, Margaret. Please ask your question. Is she able to?
Yeah.
Is it nimepotea?
Margaret is asking in sign language, and I think it is very important that we listen to this question through sign language.
Sorry, I'm the sign language interpreter. So she said that I've typed my sign language in the chat, but it's okay. I was trying to, it was hard for me to follow the sign language interpreter. So I was submitting that Kenyan Sign Language policy, is it there or not? And if it's possible that maybe we can develop a KSL policy so that it can help us to know how to help the teachers to build their capacity, how do they train the deaf children in school? Because it's a very big issue in deaf schools. So if we talk about inclusivity, that means that we cannot ignore the deaf learners as well. So we have to include them, and the only way to do that is we look for opportunities on how to make Kenyan Sign Language more accessible so that they're able to interact with the curriculum and the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margaret. And for those of you who had your cameras on, at least you have been able to see her. I appreciated, and I will try to learn sign language tomorrow. Could we please respond to those questions, our panelists? Any of our panelists?
I want to.
Yes, Anne.
Hello.
Anne, yes, we can hear you.
Respond. There was a question on if we could use the BOMs and parents associations
Yes.
in community-based learning. And I think that proposal, that forms part of the guidelines, because even as we involve the BOMs, the PAs, they must also support this kind of learning within a certain framework. And indeed, they are very helpful in ensuring the success and ensuring that its implementation is in line. It is about the parental engagement. It's about the community involvement. BOMs and the PA are part of the community. They are also part of the parents. So that is indeed the right path, and it is quite in order. The other thing is on the levies. It's about, I think somebody has asked about the levies. So in line with the Constitution, that is Article 53. Article 53 is on free and compulsory basic education. So the key question is, how free is free? Because that is what we have been asking. So basically, you find that with this, most of the parents have now thought they are relieved. You cannot even do anything, not even buying even anything to a child and all that kind of business. So I think with the continued engagement with the parents on how they are also supposed to support their children to learn, that will be fundamental even as we progress. Because basically, as parents, as communities, as alumni, as citizens of this country, we have a responsibility to support the children. Some of us would not be where we were it not because of someone somewhere who did something for us, and we were able to progress and to go through our education. I think we should go back to our roots and also see that we are able to support our children wherever they are. How we also, it's about somebody asked parents with children living with special needs and disabilities, whether they receive the social support. Indeed, they do. The parents, just like any other parents, they are not discriminated against any policy provision, any interventions, because the guidelines, the policies, the existing ones are all inclusive. And if it's time for psychosocial support adopted, they are also beneficiaries. However, they may not have been released, all of them, maybe the coverage itself. And I think that could be an area of exploration. Which was the other question? I think I didn't get the other one. Oh, there was another one. If there is a way, we could harmonize Teacher Service Commission and the Ministry of Education functions in terms of teacher management, the harmonization. Incidentally, some of the mandates, remember, agencies, ministries, departments, and the government agencies function, operate under mandates. Mandates are stipulated in the Constitution. Mandates are expounded in various executive orders that are issued by the president from time to time. However, those are good proposals moving forward, because the essence is to improve on service delivery, and all policies all legal frameworks, everything is supposed to make work function. It's supposed to make things work for man. It is policy for man, not man for policy.
Okay, so thank you, Anne. I think Anne has covered many more questions, but I still come back to the questions asked. Do we have a policy on sign language? Kenyan Sign Language has been asked to respond to our panelists.
Okay, we have for the Ministry of Education, we have the education sector policy for runners and the trainees with disabilities. And in that policy, it covers issues of Kenya Sign Language. Probably it may not be adequately covered, but that policy also covers issues of sign language, but looking at it from the education perspective.
Okay. Thank you very much. There are so many questions, so I will ask our panelists to keep their answers brief. Can you please bring Anil to be up here so that he can ask his question? And as we are bringing Anil up, there's a question from Patrick who is asking, what is the ministry doing on teacher training as far as policy alignment is concerned? I'm not quite clear about that question, but maybe somebody else is. But let me now come to more issues on homeschooling. And there's a question from Peter who is asking, the issue of homeschooling is very good. What is the role of parents in homeschooling? How will this be monitored and supervised? Homeschooling parents, how will it be monitored and supervised? Anybody who has a response to that?
I think that is already answered, because during the presentation we said the envisioned policy and also the guidelines that will follow the policy. One of the things that the focus areas will be how it will be monitored, how it will be supervised, how assessment will be done. The how is a key thing that form one of the focus areas in the policy.
Thank you very much.
Already there is a gap because we don't have that policy, we don't have that guideline. So those are issues that will actually definitely come in.
So it is stated that this will be a policy issue. So that is very good. There's a question from Sam Garuya. Do we have examples of best practices in community-based learning? How should it be structured to ensure accountability and alignment, especially to staffing policies? Any of our panelists? Do we have any examples of best practices in community-based learning? And how should it be structured to ensure accountability? I perhaps can give an example of what I have seen that has emerged in Tana River, in which we have organizations who are running community-based camps, which are supposed to ensure tooling of basic literacy and numeracy. One of the things that then has allowed it to be structured so that it is speaking to a particular goal, and to also ensure accountability, because you do not want to be wasting children's time, is that one must ensure that whatever programs run there are very thoughtful. We cannot just assume that community learning will happen. It needs to have a syllabus, a curriculum. It has to be very strong in the design. And I think this is very important, that the fact that we are talking about community-based learning does not mean it is a casual thing. It also needs to go through the same robustness as school-based learning. Let me now give the opportunity to Anil to ask and to either comment or ask his question. It was a long one. Anil, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ruto. Good morning, colleagues. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I think I'm very, very grateful to the panelists who have really shown us the policy landscape is indeed quite full. There are certainly gaps, as Ms. Kinyanjui has said. I want to take up 2 points. One is I think we have all got caught up in the excitement of the digital ecosystem, and we think we can now redesign the whole educational system. I believe that is actually fool's gold.
11:15.
One thing that is very, very evident is that all of us, whether in education, whether in religion, in any area, we have seen the primacy of health and the health sector. All our decision making over the last year is based on advice from the health sector. So it is only prudent for us in education to build on what health has already done, the health infrastructure, and to build a wider concept of human development that goes from health or education to human well-being and human flourishing. That's my first point, and that is to say there is enough policy out there. Let's focus on implementation together with other sectors, point one. The second point is basically that unless we think of sustainability at each community level, we can't speak of all marginalized or disadvantaged communities as the same. We can't think of homeschooling in a pastoral community the same as we do in an urban slum where there is no electricity infrastructure or computers, for example. So we must differentiate different communities and implement the policies that are already there and not recreate the wheel. Thank you, Dr. Ruto, to give me this chance. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment. And I will now go to a question which I think is directed to Anne. Are the two concepts of CSL and CBL being used interchangeably, or is CBL subsumed under CSL? And I think to allow us to communicate better, I'd like to ask the people who are asking the questions, do not use abbreviations. So anybody who...
And mic is mute.
We can, hello?
Yes, yes, Anne.
The two concepts are not they are not the same, but they mean almost the same thing, but these are two different concepts. But the idea is more like the same, but they have some differences.
Okay. And I think the person who asked the question probably has an answer. So if you can also share an answer, it would be very good because this is a discussion. And a question from Augusta. Kindly clarify the link between homeschooling and community-based learning. Anybody who'd like to take to discuss this, or Augusta can actually be brought in to respond to her own question. Anybody who wants to clarify the link? Yes, please.
Augusta?
So Augusta is being requested to come on board and to also clarify the link between homeschooling and community-based learning. If you can please promote Augusta, that would be great. Benta is asking, do we have enough evidence to support community-based learning to anchor the policy that is being developed? How is it going to be linked to CBC?
Hello, Dr. Sala. Could I respond?
Yes, Augusta, wonderful. Come in. And then Benta might also come up to respond to her own question. And the reason I'm doing this is that because this is an exploratory brainstorming session. Augusta, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah and your team. This is a very exciting discussion. Now, to my understanding, homeschooling involves parents or first caregivers. And community-based learning involves what I would call a third party. So, we bring children together, maybe in a hall or in a chief's camp or in a church, and a qualified teacher takes them through learning that is, well, systematic, not just ad hoc. And it covers broader area. Now, the homeschooling, there are parents who use more or less the normal curriculum. And for me, yes, there's a link, but there are two distinct approaches to learning, and both are very important, especially now that we have experienced what COVID-19, the stay-at-home period, what it's doing to children. From my own perspective, if we are able to utilize the two, they will work depending on where one is. Because basically, my experience is that homeschooling caters for a certain class of the society that are able to do that the parents are able to stay at home because they can afford. But the community-based learning caters for children across board, and more so those children who may not have anybody to stay with at home, especially at this time when schools are closed. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Augusta. And I think you have also responded to the same issue Mary Otieno raised on homeschooling and community-based learning, what is at stake over here. I don't know if Benta can also be brought up because she has raised a question which she probably also has an answer to. And Molly Gao is writing, what is the level of engagement between the Ministry of Education and the Homeschooling Legal Defense Association? I do not know if anybody in the panel knows about the Homeschooling Legal Association. And if Molly is there, perhaps she can be brought up because maybe she can also inform this gathering about this Homeschooling Legal Defense Association. Have we gotten Benta? Okay, Molly, please go ahead. Unmute, please.
I have done so. Thank you, Dr. Sarah. Am I?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. This is an association that is known in Kenya. And I'm sure when the ministry was being put on the table about the homeschooling, it came up. It is a group of parents that are for homeschooling. And to them, they feel that it should be allowed for their reasons and many reasons that we know. So the Basic Education Act number 14 of 2013 also has it that some government officials say that homeschooling is illegal, but this group is for homeschooling. It cuts across and mostly for the high social class. So that is why I was asking whether the Ministry of Education and this group is in tandem. Are they working together? Maybe from Anne Gachoya or Dr. Mulambe, yes, we can get to know whether they know this group.
Hello.
Yes, Dr.
Yes, just to respond, I think we have not met this association, but just like I said in my introductory remarks, I think this could have been the group that went to court and the court advised that we have a discussion. So we are still trying to develop a case, or rather to develop the concept around homeschooling before we invite that particular group to a discussion. But otherwise, they did not come to us as the group that Molly is trying to talk about. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, and this is the purpose of these conversations, that partnerships be entered into, because we know that public participation is indeed a constitutional requirement. So that is possibly a conversation that will be followed up by the policy unit. Another question from Irene Gathara: which curriculum will homeschooling be allowed to run on? Homeschooling, which curriculum? Either Dr. Silvester or Anne. Yes, please.
Again, if you remember, the last slide in my presentation, it's about the curriculum. What is the curriculum? So I think we are jumping. What we need to do is to have a conversation on how we can work around these areas, because these are thoughts that we are bringing out thoughts together so that we see what can work best for this country and the benefits, even the inaccessible, even the hard to reach, and everyone else who have some or who are undergoing circumstances that make them not be able to follow the normal school setting. So we looked at the second last slide was saying some of the focus areas of the policy will be the curriculum. So your question is and will be answered at that point. What curriculum will be put in place? I'm sure the same participants will be members who will be coming up with ideas on how to go about this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can,
thank you.
Sarah, maybe if I can add something on the curriculum, the same applies to community-based learning. Because again, we don't want to have a community school, because now either it will be a registered school or it falls under the APBET. So again, we have a lot to think around the community-based learning. Is it just within the period where there is an emergency, or where children cannot access a formal school? Or is it short-term? And if it is long-term, are they falling under APBET, or are they following the curriculum that majority of children follow? So there's a lot to think about. The same thing as homeschooling. So many parents I've met who homeschool is because they want to focus probably on other things like religion or arts or things that they may not find in formal curriculum. Again, will it be the standard 6 years, and if they shorten, again, where does that fall? So there's a lot to think about. So I agree with Gachoya, there's a lot to think about when agreeing on the curriculum, so that we are also not duplicating what already exists. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, I also wanted to add, I think I agree with my two colleagues who have spoken already, and that this is a conversation that is still going to take place when we reach that particular point. But it's good to note that it may be very difficult to restrict parents to a particular curriculum. Because today the homeschooling is going on. I think that is also important to note. There are parents who have hired teachers privately in their houses, and learning is going on. Some of them are undertaking international curriculum, a majority. Some of them, of course, are taking our 844, and so on and so forth. It may be a little difficult, but it's a conversation that is ongoing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So there is a question on ICT from Robert Kiplagat. How can we use ICT to ensure continuity in homeschooling in regions lacking teachers? And this also connects to previous questions, I think, from Eden, who talk about like when teachers exit from schools, like we have seen because of safety issues in the northeastern counties, and children are in school. How does one ensure continuity? So ICT and homeschooling. How do you see it panning out, the panelists?
Yes, Chair. You see, the whole issue of ICT, remote learning, of course, integration of ICT. It's also good to mention here that we have put a lot of good material in the ICT policy that is almost coming out. I think we are at a regional stakeholder participation level. Very soon, that particular document will come out, covering all those areas that have been lacking in what we are doing, including remote teaching and learning. But I agree with my colleague who has asked that question, that we still need to do more in terms of using technology to replace even the physical, the face-to-face teaching, and particularly to assist the ASAL areas. But there's quite a lot in our ICT policy, which is almost coming out, which covers most of that they're saying. And I believe once that particular document comes out, most of these questions on remote learning and ICT integration, we shall have been addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. So could somebody bring Peter Sitiene up, because he has a number of questions he wants to pose over here. And then a very quick question: do children who are homeschooled get NEMIS numbers?
Chair, the answer to that is no. You know, it is a framework that we are still working on, and we have not reached there where we have even actually identified that kind of schooling as a schooling in place. So once we reach there, then we shall also address the issue of NEMIS, because see, NEMIS uses codes which cover even the institution, the sub-county, the county, and so on. So when we reach that point, we shall now be able to see, now this one who learns at home, what do you do about the coding that stands in for the school? Thank you, Chair.
And Bilasio is asking, how will homeschooling be facilitated by parents who didn't go to school? In other words, I think the deeper question that Bilasio is asking, will the concept of homeschooling present certain equity gaps, that it is really for those who come from a specific socioeconomic class and who have a specific education background and are able perhaps to give their children more attention, while the one who does not have all these advantages anyway cannot participate. So this is a policy only to benefit a few, is what I'm reading from Bilasio's question. If any of you have any thoughts on that. And then we will come to Peter Sitiene.
Chair, if I could also attempt, you know, equity gaps we may not avoid. You know, even when we are talking about private schools and public schools, you know, the issue of equity is still there. And you see, when we go the direction of homeschooling, it will be more of a matter of choice than otherwise. But you see now that who cannot take part in the homeschooling shall have been taken care of through our public schools. So issues of others being advantaged, particularly in this particular aspect of homeschooling, we cannot rule it out. But of course, I still had the question, the question from this gentleman was, if the parent is illiterate, how will the parent support homeschooling? But I think that is still possible. Many illiterate parents have had their children get education because they hire the right people at school. So my answer to that is that the illiterate parent who is able to hire the right person at home will still be able to participate in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter, I had brought you up to talk, but I've just realized our time is up. So unless I give you 10 seconds only.
That's all right, Madam Chair. I don't know if you are audible enough.
Yes, you are.
Okay, my question actually my direction actually is on the SNE platform on the costing of the maybe homeschooling. As much as we talk about homeschooling, and I want to appreciate what Dr. Joyce Kinyanjui said about the funding and so on. With the special children, actually, especially the children with visual impairment, children with the hearing impairment, when it comes to the homeschooling, and especially we go to the cloud system of the KICD and so on, of course, you are doing a very good work. We have a challenge to reach on your channel because of our disability. So my question is that when we are doing this policy, kindly the Ministry of Education consider also the children with disabilities so that they are also on board. We don't only talk of maybe the marginalized,
Thank you.
Marginalized is a broad spectrum.
Thank you. Consider the children with disability. I have to stop now because it is already 11:30. We will call you next time. Please, I have to stop because I have to respect time. My panelists, your parting shot, three words, parting shot. I will begin with Dr. Joyce Kinyanjui. 3 words, parting shot.
I think with the team that we have, we can continue championing for the right of every child to quality education in Kenya. Thank you.
Championing a right of every child. And Gachoya, your parting shot, 3 words.
Thank you. The conversation should be continued. Keeping
Conversations.
in mind the beneficiary, the learner.
Thank you.
Is the focus.
Conversations with the learner at the center. Dr. Silvester Mulambe, your parting shot.
Yeah, thank you very much. A good opportunity. Thank you very much for Pal. And then 2, this is a good opportunity and this strategy should continue. And then 3, let me thank Dr. Kinyanjui for the policy gaps that she brought. I think that is good for us. It's going to help us bridge certain gaps that we may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all the participants. My apologies because we have overshot this meeting by 2 minutes, but we appreciate your questions, your engagement. This is a policy direction that requires you. So we look forward to your participation as we are thinking about what to do with homeschooling and community-based learning. You can see that we posed more questions than answers. So with those few remarks, I'd like to say happy holidays and many, many thanks to our 3 panelists who braved it to receive so many questions and comments from all of you all. Asanteni sana and happy holidays. And of course, thank you to the team behind there of Dion and everybody who have ensured that the logistics go right. Asanteni.